Ah yes, League of Legends, the real man's game. The game where you sit in a chair by yourself, playing in a team. The game where when a teammate makes a mistake, you berate them as if they broke your arm, and then proceed to tell them to go kill themselves. From behind a computer screen, while no one knows who you are. Huh. That's manly? Yeah, who are? Now, to be fair to League, it's not as if this type of behaviour is necessarily restricted to the game. It can be seen across all forms of online media. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube comments, forums, 4chan, ooh boy, that's a cluster in itself, or even other online games. It is merely an unintended side effect of being a part of this digital, anonymous realm of interactivity, where anonymity can invoke both disinhibition and de-individuation, allowing users to act in ways they would never do offline. And yet, within at least the gaming community, all the fingers point to League as being this roiling mass of toxicity. League. League, 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 League. Boy, try saying that 20 times. So why is that? Why does this simple PC game with no voice chat seemingly attract so much hatred? Just quickly beforehand, here's a quick overview of League for those unaware, which I'm assuming is none of you, but nevertheless. League is an online multiplayer game, where 2 teams of 5 players verse each other. Before beginning, each player picks a champion, a character with a unique set of moves, stats, and so forth, for an assigned role: top, mid, jungler, ADC, or support. They are then put on a map with 3 lanes, 2 turrets in each, try to kill the enemy champs so as to level up and earn gold to buy items, and ultimately push down their lanes to reach the enemy base and destroy it. Of course, that's just a simple overview, but it's enough to get the point across. Now, to better understand the reasoning behind the toxicity, it will also be necessary to quickly elaborate on this little theory by a man named Rob Stones. Now, for those who don't know, who am I kidding? That's all of you. Rob Stones is a social theorist. That's right, folks. Gonna be dropping some
knowledge.
Now, he looked at structuration, the theory of another theorist named Anthony Giddens, and thought that his structure of the theory was lacking.
Jesus Christ, it's Jason Bourne.
Okay, moving on. So he decided to give it a new coat of paint. Okay, not quite as bad as that, but you get the point. Stones proceeded to call this strong structuration. Imaginative, I know. Which basically concerned itself with looking at external structures, internal structures from within a person's active agency, i.e. how they act according to these structures, and then what the subsequent outcomes are, both literally and in terms of how structure is affected, all of which combined forms the quadripartite cycle. One real-life application of this theory was used by Chan, Deave, and Greenhalgh, who used it to look at childhood obesity in Hong Kong, and discovered that things like poor parenting, family stress, and weak mealtime routines played into the connection between a child's obesogenic environment and obesity development. In other words, it's handy when your top picks Morgana, and you're trying to figure out how many brain cells they had to lose to even consider picking him. There's also Margaret Archer's analytical dualism, which partially inspired Stones' own theory, and looks at structure and agency as separate concepts, with their own roles and effects, but that interlink over time. But what does this all have to do with toxic behaviour? I hear you ask. Well, funny you should say that, my little friend, because this is where it gets spicy. So here's a shout out to my TLDW people out there. People are toxic because the game itself promotes it. Now, hear me out, alright? because for some of you, you might already know what I'm talking about. So let's use that example to better explain myself. Let's say that you're playing ranked, you've nearly got enough points for a series,
and then your top decides to pick Morgana.
Now you've probably got little alarm bells going off in your head that you might lose this match, but you play it off. The guy seems like he knows what he's doing, and it's not like
Morgana
loses more matches than he wins, right? So you're playing the match, and 2 minutes in, you see the dreaded
First blood.
And what do you know?
Morgana
Was the victim. Now of course he's apologising, trying to drone out those alarm bells, and you go, okay, sure, one death doesn't mean anything. But by the 10th minute,
Morgana
died about 4 more times, the enemy ADC and support are about 4 levels higher than anyone else on either team, and they've already taken the first turret. Now you may wait another 10 minutes until you start getting absolutely bodied in teamfights, all thanks to this
Morgana,
who, by the way, has just stopped talking, or you may do so now. But either way, you end up thinking of the series you're about to miss out on,
that your top picked Morgana to go top
in a ranked match, how you went against your better judgment to not just reset the whole match because you didn't want to be that guy who didn't believe in your teammate, so on and so forth. And as these emotions are all boiling up inside you, go for that chat box, you type in
Morgana,
or something to that effect. And you do so knowing you won't really be punished. Or maybe you don't type anything at all. Maybe you do let the whole matter slide. You take the L and hope like hell you just don't get paired up again. But if it's not you, then you can bet that some other teammate's gonna be trash talking this Morgana. And that's where this strong structuration comes in. Now, both of the theories I chose can be used in a multitude of ways, but for the purposes of this analysis, we will be utilizing it in an anthropological manner. This means I will be looking at the emic components of cultural practice, i.e. the culture and behaviour of these league players, which will show how they live in both past, present and future. In particular, these theories may help elucidate the internet's construction of identity, social interactions, and collective action. So, by also using analytical dualism, we can see that the chat box acts as an external structure, and the fact that you know before starting the game that you are anonymous and that you can trash talk without repercussion, this acts as your internal structure. Both combined form the structure of league culture, and as such already exists before you even start playing. Now, your active agency operates within this structure and starts taking shape when you are playing and your Morgana starts losing your match, because that's when you have all those emotions and thoughts building up inside you, acting as an irresistible causal force. From this, you decide to utilize these structures to your advantage, which, of course, leads to the outcome, the actual trash talking itself. But since Stone's theory is cyclical, this outcome also re-establishes the structure of the game and shows how it interlinks with agency, because now you have people who think they can get away with berating their teammates, just as you discovered from prior experience. Perhaps then Morgana is going to be a Jack's next game, and his support ends up costing the game. Food for thought. Of course, another outcome of this behaviour was the formulation of the tribunal. With so much toxicity beginning to form, this regulatory body was formed so that players could report each other for such things as bad behaviour, which the tribunal would then review and potentially deliver punishment, ranging from
a warning, temporary suspension, or even a permanent ban.
We also have the developer Riot simultaneously creating new rules of conduct with which players can then engage, either directly with Riot or amongst themselves within forums. When engaged, they are interpreted through what they consider norms, their own internal set of rules governing behaviour, and with all of these combined, it forms the structure of the community. As Ko and Nardi put it, players' participation and engagement characterize governance in League. Once again, this is all part of the quadripartite cycle, as the toxic behaviour of players ultimately end up creating these new rules and processes, which then affects how players act in matches, and so the cycle continues. That being said, it's also interesting to note the infamous Video Game Donkey episode. For those unaware, Video Game Donkey was an extremely popular League YouTuber, but who retired and moved on to other games. The crux leading to his retirement occurred after a match when one of his teammates began intentionally dying to the other team, and after writing a rather lengthy comment, the one I actually used before, Donkey was banned, and yet his teammate was not. Now, this perhaps goes into the ineffectiveness of the tribunal, which is a fair point, and I'm not trying to paint Donkey as a bad person. However, it is still revealing that he would justify his comment as simply talking shit.
What is this, fucking pussy-ass baby preschool time?
A justification that would hardly seem legitimate if used in a real-life situation, and one that was discussed heavily throughout the community afterwards. Again, though, not trying to paint him as a bad person, and as a matter of fact, directly after this justification, he mentions how
the root of toxicity is the game. It's just not fun and it pisses people off.
Funny that he mentions that, as according to Christopher Paul, the toxicity does indeed go down to the very fundamental core and design of the game itself. By incorporating an ELO system, which grades your skill and thus overall status based on your win-loss ratio, League essentially holds players accountable for their team's actions, as seen in the Donkey example where his ELO rating would have gone down due to losing his match, but only because a teammate intentionally sabotaged their efforts. It does not account for how well he may have played himself. As such, there is this idea that despite being in a team, players are all competing against each other for their own personal growth and status, and when this growth is stunted by another teammate, well, if you paid any attention to the prior example, you know what's going to happen next. In other words, League injects inequality and toxicity into the system by individualizing group results. In the end, it is this meritocratic nature of League that practically supports toxicity, and from Stones' perspective, would act as a further external structure that influences a player's active agency. Of course, this might all lead to a future outcome where the tribunal becomes more effective in their role at banning the correct people, or perhaps lead to a fundamental change in the game where those who play well but are let down by teammates are nevertheless rewarded for their skill, which would end up altering League structure in a much more positive way. But for now, toxicity reigns supreme. So what can we take from this? Well, utilizing Stones' strong structuration and Archer's analytical dualism, we can see that players are well aware of the external and internal structures of their environment beforehand, that being the simple chat box, League's ELO system, and the anonymity granted to them. Players then engage in active agency when, unable to withstand a teammate's poor skills any longer, they decide to work this structure to their advantage, leading to the outcome of insulting said teammate. This then causes future players, having witnessed its effects, to later utilize it for themselves, and so these norms of toxicity are continuously perpetuated. Even with the added rules and processes designed to mitigate this aspect of matches, the very nature of League is still strong enough to push players to risk the banning of their account, all for the sake of calling someone a cunt.